I think the Dáil Committee report has exposed arguments and underlying assumptions behind what I would describe as near hysteria about a pension time bomb. And this committee's report has shown that this is a false narrative. Since the recession in 2008, there's been constant clamour from economists and employers to tackle the rising costs of state pensions. And we heard it from the Minister tonight. This must be done. It's a hard decision. We have to look after the young, etc. The chief argument that the government and the economists make is that people are living longer and that in the future the ratio between the numbers of workers in the labour force and the numbers of retired workers will grow and be unsustainable. Words like burden and dependency are used to convey that message. Workers living longer is a time bomb that must be diffused, and the only solution is to defer pension payments from 65 to 68 and possibly later if need be. And I find the Minister has dismissed the Dáil Committee report, and I concur with Deputy O'Keefe's anger on that. And why do I say this is a false narrative? Firstly, the calculation of the ratio between those of working age and those over 65 is an arbitrary and misleading one. We're told that there are approximately 4.5 people of working age for every pensioner, and this is set to decrease to 3.5 to every pensioner by 2030 and 2.3 workers to every pensioner by 2051. This actually means very little, even if it was correct. It doesn't tell us how productive that those who are still working are, nor how dependent those over 65 will be, nor if demographic trends are certain. People living longer now should be a great cause for celebration. Not only are people living longer, but those with extra years are healthier and more active for most than past generations have been. And while they may be getting a modest state pension, many are still active and productive and providing essential labour for wider society. In that sense, they are not dependent. The ratio used doesn't tell us how many of those under 65 can and do work, nor does it calculate how many over 65 will continue to work or would choose to do so if they were allowed. And equally at the other end of the equation, it's misleading. A modern technology-driven economy means that workers stay in education for longer than we did decades ago, and also that under the state pension age they cannot as yet join the workforce. And at that same time, many women are being forced out of the workforce because of childcare costs. Many of those over 65 continue to play vital roles in our society, even if they've formally left the workforce. Most of them will be in good health, not dependent on health services or other services, in the same proportion to people of that age in previous decades. For example, it's only because of retired workers, where their grandparents are close families, providing unpaid childcare, that many families, many thousands of people, can continue to work. So, secondly, the expected cost of this time bomb. It's presented as a given and insurmountable fact that it can only be avoided by raising the pension age. It is not. The Commission, for example, calculated that the Social Insurance Fund deficit, the fund that PRSI taxes go into and that pays out benefits like the state pension, could reach 13 billion in 2050 if no changes are implemented. The savings predicted from raising the age to 68 are calculated to be at 3.8 billion in 2050. In fact, none of these are certain figures, and research shows that when the pension age was increased to 66 in 2014, it had little impact on the number of people who retired at the age of 65. The impact of forcing thousands to work longer will have unintended consequences and will not be cost-free. Childminders and volunteers in many vital sectors will have been kept at work, and this will have a knock-on effect on our society. What's not publicised by the economists or the government is the fact that raising the tax paid by employers could address any deficit. If the PRSI paid by employers was raised by just 4 or 5%, that would add another 3 or 4 billion euro to the fund, as highlighted in the Dáil report. This is more than the savings from raising the retirement age is predicted to yield. Workers will pay into the Social Insurance Fund throughout their entire working life. Indeed, since the last recession, they've also paid additional taxes like USC, with little or no tangible benefits, while employers continue to pay the lowest PRSI rates in Europe. The first step in addressing this issue is to raise that rate and to make sure that the Social Insurance Fund does not face a deficit. The Government, of course, will faint at the notion of raising taxes on employers, but then they've no problem taking the hard decision to slash workers' benefits or to raise the retirement age. Thirdly, the fact that the ratio may increase does not in itself constitute a crisis. By every measure available, worker productivity has increased enormously over recent decades. Indeed, the gap between workers' productivity and their pay has also widened. In the US, for example, since the 1970s, workers' productivity has increased by a staggering 61% compared to wages which have increased only by 17%. The difference is pocketed as profits and helps explain the widening inequality across many countries. Irish workers are the same. Massive leaps in productivity over decades go side by side with a decreasing share of the overall wealth in society. In 1970, the share of national income for employed and self-employed was 89% of the economy, but by 2012 that had declined to 60%. The point here is that 3 workers in 2030 will be as productive as 5 workers were in 1970, and logically there's no need to fear that that ratio or the ability of society to support a population living longer if wealth and resources are distributed equitably and social supports are funded through taxes on wealth and profits. And as unions and workers fight against these proposed changes, the wider arguments have come under scrutiny and have been exposed. Behind the attempts to raise the pension age is a philosophy that never, ever looks to raise taxes on employers or to tax the vast wealth that workers generate as profits during their working lives. Instead, it seeks to reduce the rights and support that workers have fought for over generations. The real agenda behind the pension time bomb myth is the continuation of an ongoing war on all workers' rights and entitlements. We shouldn't fall for this, and we should defend the right to retire and bring it back indeed to 65 as a cornerstone of a decent society. Finally, it's not about fairness. All of what you're saying, Minister, is not about fairness or equity. It's part of an ongoing war on pensions and retired workers. PRSI and employers is a hard decision, but taxing retired workers on modest pensions or forcing workers to work another 2 years, you seem to be happy with that. The best of luck to you when you go before the electorate in 2025 on a platform of raising the retirement age to 68.